Welcome back to Steel and Mance. Okay, get ourselves set. We're going to talk about Trump. The news cycle is running so quickly. The headlines are coming fast and furious. We got Donald Trump on trial, first ever.
Former U.S. president charged with a felony who is facing the music, finally. A lot of people have said, gosh, it never seems like there's any consequences. And here he is, sitting in a courtroom, not happy to be there, falling asleep and all the rest of it.
And he's been told, hey, listen, you're not allowed to talk. There he is talking. Yep. The gag order being broken multiple times.
The judge is going to rule on that tomorrow, I think.
Yeah.
Everybody thought jury selection was going to take weeks. Boom. They've had some issues, though.
They have. Juror excused because she was concerned that her identity had been given away, and another one that might have had a little bit of a legal issue in the past. And then we're sitting here wondering, will it take weeks to get this jury set? Oh, no. We actually had to pause for a moment because our very busy Washington correspondent, Reggie Cecchini, was getting the details on the fact, Reggie, the jury is set?
Wow.
Yeah, the jury is set. It was just before 4:30 New York time. They had 5 jurors, and by 4:33 New York time, they had 12 jurors. And then a couple of minutes later, they had their first alternate that was chosen. And then the court was dismissed for the day, everybody going back 9:30 in the morning, New York time on Friday. And Judge Juan Merchan is still kind of pushing here to potentially have opening arguments in this case set for Monday. So here we were thinking that jury selection was going to take days and days and days here, and this trial could actually start early next week, facing the realities too that that Passover starts next week, that there is no court on Wednesdays for other court matters. But realistically, the moment that Donald Trump kind of never thought would happen is quickly running around the corner here.
Because he's tried everything to push it off and to make sure that trial didn't happen. So clearly there's going to be some salacious stuff coming out that he doesn't want his supporters to know. And yet there's Trump coming out and saying, this judge is corrupt and he's rushing things. I mean, this is not going to be good for Donald Trump.
No, I mean, look, I spoke to a couple of people in the political world, including a state attorney from Florida, who made a point of saying you never want your leading candidate of your party who is trying to be the president to also call themselves defendant when they are in trial. And, I think it's important to remember here that most of Trump's base sees this as bogus. They believe when Donald Trump says that this is a scam. But at the same time, there was polling that was out either late last week or early this week that suggested a quarter of Republicans, 1 in 4, now see these charges against Trump as serious. And that ultimately could pose a problem, especially as we head towards November, because Trump has really failed to expand his base over the years. So if he's now losing small segments of that because they are finally facing the reality that these legal matters aren't just something to kind of blow away in the wind, that could be impactful by November when Trump is ultimately at the top of the ticket and people are heading into a ballot box.
Mm-hmm. So Reggie, we see the headlines. We're watching it very closely. Both Linda and I are just constantly getting updates, but you're actually standing outside that courthouse. You've been following along on the trajectory of Donald Trump, the pre-presidential, during his presidency, and now. Take us on a bit of a journey as to what the environment is like today when you're around former President Trump.
Well, I mean, look, when I was in New York earlier this week for the first day of jury selection and even for the day before, and it was different than it was when we were there for the indictment. It was different than when we were there for the matters involving his business fraud trial. In those instances, he had supporters all over the streets around the courthouse. This time around this week, there were very few Trump supporters. And if anything, there were more people marching through the street who had an anti-Trump sentiment. And even New Yorkers that would walk up on the street and talk to us, most of them would make comments of, look, America is going to fall apart if they don't find the former president guilty in this case. And I think that, it might not show that there's been this big political shift or this big shift in how, public perception of Donald Trump is. But I mean, this is a president who was history making during his presidency and is now history making as he tries to return to the presidency, in the fact that he is now facing reality that criminal charges led to a trial and that this trial is going to start, and it's capturing the attention of America and really the world here. And being here in Washington is no different. The conversation still revolves around Donald Trump, even when there are so many other things happening.
You know, it's interesting, too. A lot of people think, oh, who cares? It's like a powerful man who slept with a woman. You know, the infidelity, nobody cares. It's about so much more than that. And one of the things I'm really, really fascinated to hear more about is the connection with the guy, David Pecker, I think his name is, who was essentially in charge of the National Enquirer. And there's going to be evidence presented showing that Donald Trump not only was behind or participating in the catch and kill of negative stories, but he was also part of planting negative, salacious stories against his, competitors like Ted Cruz. So, and he's the guy who kind of coined the fake news. He was the one who was pushing the fake news.
Sure, and I think when we start getting into the testimony from people at this trial, we're going to learn more about all of the moments that led up to when this story first broke. Look, David Pecker is going to provide incredible bits of testimony if and when he is called to the stand to give information about the catch and kill stories, not only about Stormy Daniels, but also about Karen McDougal. I think you're going to hear, also remarkable pieces of testimony from Stormy Daniels and from Karen McDougal, but also from Michael Cohen. And I think Michael Cohen is ultimately going to be one of the most problematic figures on the stand for the former president because he knows Donald Trump inside and out. He went to jail based on financial matters linked to the former president, among a host of other issues, including lying to Congress. And really, it was Michael Cohen who facilitated so many of these payments to deal with these catch and kill stories, according to the allegations. And that is going to lead to some of the salacious information. Look, we've heard from Judge Marchand that certain parts of the story are not going to be discussed, particularly, the kind of behind closed doors matters when it comes to Stormy Daniels or the fact that Melania Trump was pregnant when he allegedly had an affair with Karen McDougal. Those things aren't going to be allowed to be addressed in court, but the fact that these people will be up there telling their stories with Donald Trump directly in front of them. This is going to, we don't have cameras in the courtroom, but this is going to be a remarkable moment in kind of political legal history.
Mm-hmm. Quite the spectacle ongoing. And I'm sure if you have the time, Reggie, we'll have you back to keep coverage of this coming. We really appreciate this from you. And if this was not happening, if Donald Trump, if a former U.S. president wasn't for the first time sitting in a New York courtroom charged with these high crimes, we'd probably be talking about the tensions between Iran and Israel or Ukraine right now and the aid packages that are not getting to Ukraine to protect them from Putin's Russia. Where are we at with those stories coming out of the political realm in the U.S.?
Well, look, when it comes to the matter between Iran and Israel, we've heard from the United States, we've heard from the White House, we've heard from the president that whatever Israel does to retaliate against Iran for that massive barrage of missiles that were fired over the weekend, that it needs to be measured. It needs to do something that is not going to inflame the situation further across the Middle East. And Israel says that, its response, whatever it will be measured. And there are reports that this is something that could take place after Passover. So there is more time here for the United States to continue in conversations. We also need to find out, too, as people talk about Israel and Iran, how this could impact what is going on between Israel and Hamas with, agencies coming out today to say that in Gaza, 14,000 kids have now died as a result of this ongoing conflict. So, that's an issue that the United States is dealing with amid the kind of tabloid headlines that are surrounding the former president. At the same time, Linda and Jody, House Speaker Mike Johnson is also facing the risk of being ousted from his position because he is set to bring forward aid bills for Israel, for Taiwan, but also for Ukraine, $60 billion. That's going to go for a vote likely on Saturday. And there are Republicans who are against any money going to Ukraine, even as a report came out on Thursday that suggested munitions levels in Ukraine are at a point of where Ukraine is struggling on the front lines and Russia could get an upper hand. And even though the U.S. is producing tens of thousands of pieces of artillery every month, some of it going to Ukraine, they need the money. And Republicans, partly because of Donald Trump, are standing in the way of that. So again, these are massive international stories that have huge domestic pressure on the current administration that sometimes can kind of get lost in the news that are surrounded by the kind of outsized personality that is Donald Trump.
It's wild.
Oh, your job is so boring, Reggie. There's just never anything interesting to cover. It's just, good Lord. There's been enough news in the last year to last a couple of decades. Thanks so much for being our eyes and ears. It's super fascinating.
Anytime.
We appreciate you, Reggie Cecchini. Probably our most oft-had guest here on Steel and Vance, as we always want to get an ear on what's happening south of the border. We are those people who live upstairs. All right, will a Canadian team reclaim the Stanley Cup? That's a big question. And if so, which one? Canadians are going to weigh in on that in a recent poll.
Also, Canada's Olympic gear has been unveiled for the Paris Games, and it is getting mixed reviews. But hey, at least it's not gross and sexist like the American gear. We're going to explain when we come back.
Wait do you see that? Wait do you see this? Hey, our viewing party. Is this you? It is you, Dawn. You are entered in this week's prize.
We have Hannah in Victoria. Hello, Hannah.
Jill and Monty in Souk.
And Linda in New Westminster. Hello, Linda.
Are all entered to win a $100 gift card for Tap and Barrel, the new Tap and Barrel just opened at Brentwood Mall. It's compliments of the BC Restaurant and Food Services Association.